Buckle up for AEC Trailblazers, the Founders Files, where we crack open the stories of the brightest minds in the AEC startup scene. Forget institutional pitches. We're diving deep into the real personal journeys of these industry disruptors. Get ready for some casual chats firsthand.
Hello, and welcome everybody to the AEC Trailblazers podcast, where we interview the most amazing founders of the AEC. Today with us is Chris Barton. He holds a mechanical engineering degree from Santa Clara University and has established himself as a top leader in DFM, Design for Manufacturing. He's the co-founder and CEO of Drafter, a Silicon Valley-backed venture revolutionizing the intersection of design and manufacturing automation. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Valentin. Excited to be here.
What did I miss from the description of the bio?
Wow, it's such a big space, right? I think you missed the fact that I'm a huge space geek. I think you missed the fact that, I've been working in this industry for my entire career and I, want to see it improve. I love the world of engineering and manufacturing and building physical things for this, planet that we live on.
I'm not going to ask questions, not yet, about SpaceX and what you think about it, and I bet that eventually all these kind of companies that are building rockets are going to use your product. So I feel that might be exciting. How everything started, how you ended up deciding, you know what, I love to create things for the material world and I want to automate it, and how you ended up doing this?
Yeah. So I came from Santa Clara University in Silicon Valley with a mechanical engineering degree. And while I was studying, I took a class in the Intro to Aerospace. And it was there that I, really fell in love with the space industry. I'd always been a space geek, but the ability to now be able to make an impact on that was really exciting. And so I left Santa Clara knowing I wanted to work in the space industry, which, I feel very fortunate. A lot of people leave college not really knowing what they want to do. And I immediately moved back to Denver, Colorado, where I'm from, and worked at Sierra Nevada Corporation, a company building a space plane called the Dream Chaser. And it was there that I got to experience, firsthand what it's like to work on space hardware, to work on something that is, going to take astronauts to and from the space station, needs to be rated for all those things. And that was the first domino to fall in, a number of different experiences where I got better and learned a lot about building real things for the real world.
Interesting. You made it sound so simple, like just build stuff to send people to the moon. Whatever, simple, right? And after that, what happened? Did you start with Drafter or something happened in between?
Yeah, so a lot of things happened in between, actually. I spent a number of years after Sierra Nevada working at Space Systems Loral, designing antennas for geosynchronous satellites, big carbon fiber dishes that effectively pointed energy at Earth and, allowed these communication satellites to send and receive signals. It was there that I got to experience, the furthest right of incredibly high precision, but low volume manufacturing, right? These satellites would take 3 years to go from initial concept to something that's fully tested and getting shipped to the launch site. And so, it was an amazing experience, but I also felt like I was a bit of a cog in the machine. I wanted to experience something that moved at a faster pace and have more creativity and autonomy. And so I did some soul searching. I decided it was time to leave the space industry for a little while. And I found myself at Airbnb. I was one of the first mechanical engineers hired full-time at Airbnb on a small R&D team called Samara that was focused on building modular houses for, people to host additional guests or themselves in their backyards. And so these houses, the initial concept was a complete modular system that would get put into a backyard and could be taken away as soon as somebody had, no longer had the need for that home back there. That was an amazing experience. We grew that team. It was essentially a startup within this big company. We grew that team from 5 to 55 at one point. They actually have rolled out into their own company called Samara, and they're actively deploying houses, which is exciting. They now crane them into people's backyards. And so they have a factory that is producing houses and actually delivering them across, I think, the Southwest United States right now. But at that point, obviously, big space geek, I learned a ton about residential construction. And so I moved down to Austin, Texas to work at a startup called Icon Technologies. People may be familiar with them. They're the ones 3D printing houses with gigantic robots. Beautiful videos of concrete getting laid down in these amazing feeds that form the wall and soon to be roof systems of homes. And so an amazing experience, working there. That company scaled almost 5x in employee count while I was there. I got to do a lot of work between the two different sides of the business. Obviously, the terrestrial side, printing houses for folks, but also got to participate in some of the early designs for the space team, which raised $56 million from NASA, raised one to print landing pads on the moon, essentially leveraging their knowledge of robotic construction. And so, I've gotten to experience a wide variety of construction processes, home implementation. I've, solved a lot of the problems, designed a lot of aspects of a house. But needless to say, all of those experiences led me to a moment where I really yearned for better processes in hardware development. And that is where Drafter began.
And I bet you like pain, so that's why you decided to become an entrepreneur, right?
Exactly. Eating glass and staring into the abyss.
Yeah. How you decided, like, hey, I'm gonna do my own thing, or when you decided that?
It was always an idea. I love the idea of having, ownership, of having autonomy, of having, something that I care so deeply for that it consumes me. And, throughout kind of all of my jobs, I've worked effectively for smaller and smaller groups until, it was time to do something on my own. And so, I really left Icon knowing that I wanted to build my own company. And at that point in time, it was really a matter of finding things that I deeply cared about, that I knew enough about to really make an impact on. And obviously, all of that experience in the hardware development world led to this. I've always been a process person, right? No matter what I've been building, I've been trying to improve the processes of how our team collaborates and eventually gets to this. And, Drafter is positioning itself as an amazing tool to automate away all of the boring parts, the worst parts of mechanical engineers' jobs, and allow people to be incredibly efficient at the work that they do.
That's really interesting. And given the fact that I know about your journey and when someone has an idea and decides like, hey, I'm gonna build my startup, you have two decisions, right? Or you have thousands, but two main decisions, which are gonna build something, and when I'm done, I'm gonna release it, but I'm gonna keep it quiet while I focus only on building that. But there are others who decide, you know what? I don't care about building something. I'm gonna start doing marketing and making a lot of noise, and then while I'm doing that, I'm gonna start building this thing. Which route did you decide to go, and why?
Yeah, it's a hard choice, and it's not necessarily one that always has a clear answer as to why. My co-founder Peter and I discussed this a lot. We chose to build in stealth for about a year before announcing what we were actually working on. The reason for that is we had, first movers advantage. We are really one of the only companies that is tackling this problem from this direction. And we needed to go validate that, by talking to customers and eventually building a product and getting into their hands, that we were both building the right thing, but also making sure that when we had that moment of announcement, it could allow it to really be directed in a positive one for us in the business. Not to say that that's the right answer. We've seen people who have, been building out loud and have been incredibly successful with that. So, it was the path that we took, but not necessarily one that makes sense for everyone.
No, and I think it varies not only depending on the founders, like, hey, I'm a founder who enjoys and wants to focus just on this, but also depends on the idea. And it's not the same doing something that is, B2B than doing something that is B2C. And you might need a lot of FOMO before releasing it. And I don't know, I feel there are so many variables, and there is never a recipe, I guess.
Yeah. And it also, it totally depends on what you're building. Some people can build something in a weekend and have a prototype that gets into their hands. We obviously, had a pretty highly technical product that took a while to develop. And obviously that didn't mean, I always joked we were the worst kept secret, right? If anyone talked to us, we would tell you exactly what we were working on. It just couldn't Google us. And so, it worked, right? We got people's feedback. We got people to use our product months before we announced it publicly, and got ourselves to a position where when it was able to come public, right, it could be usable by anyone who reaches out to us.
How do you decide when to release a product? Because it depends on, for sure, you might have certain money and certain runway, but at the same time, you're the one who decides. There's no investor, there's anybody, no one backing you, or no one pushing you to release tomorrow. So how do you decide when to release the product, when it's ready to be out there?
Man, this is such a dangerous thing to Google or look up online, because everyone has an opinion, and none of those opinions understand the context of you and your business. What really resonated with me of, hearing about other people's experiences was, if you wait to the point where your product is ready to release it, you've waited too long, because you've maybe built in a direction where, somebody doesn't necessarily want what you're building. And we've been very intentional about ensuring that every product decision we're making is backed by the wants and needs of our customers. And so, we essentially got to a point where our product was good, functioning, right? There's obviously tons of work to do, and we're getting better literally every day, every week. But it was at the point where, I could take it and put it in front of some of my old colleagues, or, somebody net new, and it would be, truly serve the problem and solve the pain that we're really addressing in that moment. And so we decided to ramp it up and obviously go public, and X emerged from stealth. And what that allows us to do now is, build out loud, show people what we're working on, get their feedback, help educate in some of the areas that we're really focusing on, like geometric dimensioning and tolerancing, the best, practices for reading a drawing and creating drawings. We can dive into kind of more of what Drafter does, but obviously, those are all things that we're focusing on today.
No, and it makes sense. I'm a big gaming guy, and I'm a geek, man, and I love to follow the developers for games, right? And there is this game called Hollow Knight. I don't know if you know it, but it's just two developers. Two developers is one of the games with more sold in the whole history of the world. And these guys took the first time 3 years to develop the game, and everybody complained because we were supposed to take 1 year. So the second game, they didn't tell anybody how much time it was going to take. It has been more than 6 years now. They're still working on it, and they don't care. And they don't care because it's about them, and it's about their process. And everybody knows that when they release it, it's going to be a huge success. So yeah. I think that there is, again, no recipe for success. It varies so much depending on the product and the founder. But going back to the industry itself, the manufacturing industry itself, that I don't know, my feeling with the manufacturing industry is that this is still so much to do. Not only with the way things are produced, like doing 3D printing, but there is there is so much to do, and so sometimes things take a huge amount of time. I don't know what's your feeling on the industry. You know more than me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll take a step back and just explain for everyone what Drafter does, because
Absolutely.
we positioned ourselves to be directly between the entire design world and the manufacturing world. So in mechanical design, right, all of these billion-dollar CAD businesses have the ability to do amazing parametric modeling. This results in all of these objects. But when it's time to go to manufacturing, you need to create these assets that communicate the ranges of acceptability, called tolerances, on each of these parts. And so Drafter is, the name is very on the nose. Our first product is actually automating the creation of those 2D mechanical drawings. And those are the communication, right, from a designer to a manufacturer on what needs to get made and what that acceptability is. And so not only are we creating kind of this new wedge between these two ecosystems, but also we are now dealing with all of the things that need to improve in both of those worlds, right? And I agree, in the manufacturing space, there's so many ways that things can improve, right? It's one of the most analog industries out there, which is crazy because, most people don't understand the manual processes that are going into a lot of the work that's done today. Even though we're in a highly digitized age, some of those processes are just still not there.
Oh, absolutely. And I do feel that we were just speaking about this, that drawings is something that nobody wants to do. Not even the construction world, manufacturing, nobody wants to do drawings because you're a designer, you want to design. And then you don't want to waste time on communicating your design because that's not exciting. That's not something you want to do. Nobody goes to university saying hey, I'm going to be a drafter, I'm going to do the drawings. Maybe there are some crazy guys out there, but it's not the most common thing. So, and it's not something that it's going to improve the value of your design. It's just communicating so it can be manufactured. So it's interesting that you're doing that. And I'm curious on what were the first, responses from guys who were doing this manually when you approached to them.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't believe some of the stories that I hear, right? There are so many instances where people have had to throw away or scrap, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars of parts because the manufacturing information that they sent either on a drawing or, on no drawing at all, resulted in those parts just getting trashed. And so taking one of the most boring parts of engineers' jobs, one of the parts that is the least enjoyable, and automating it away so that it's incredibly high quality communication and that it is standardized. So that means that everyone from an entire organization is now communicating in the same way. People's eyes light up, right? They're like, oh my gosh, you can solve this pain point and improve the quality of our work. And so, getting engineers excited is really fun, as an engineer myself, but also understanding the positions that they've been in, right? We are solving in a very acute pain that is going to really open up drafters' positioning to the larger, ecosystem and drastically change the way that hardware is developed and designed right now.
This is insane. And sorry, but sometimes I like to be the devil's advocate, right? No, I don't want to be mean, but no, in general, drawings are here and they will be here for a long, long time. We know that they're not going to disappear, but eventually you don't feel that in many years, there's going to be a different way of communicating. And I don't know, it's going to be directly from, a designer to machine without the need for someone to be in between and have drawings.
So not only do I agree with you, Drafter is going to be the reason that people move from 2D drawings to an actual digital age, right? We are meeting the entire ecosystem at the lowest common denominator, a piece of paper that connects these two gigantic digital ecosystems. Once we can produce that and give that to people for free, right? Have them be able to create that in minutes, right? Typically, a drawing will take you anywhere from 30 minutes to over an hour, depending on what it is, right? Assembly drawings can take days, weeks, right? We've seen some amazing drawings come through. But to be able to do that in minutes means there's now no reason to not include this information. Now, once we do that, we will create standardization across this, and we will output the same digital information and give it to people in addition to their 2D PDF. And by doing that, the manufacturing world now has the ability to ingest this information, and we can eventually get to a point where the 2D piece of paper is a relic of the past. And I would love to cannibalize our 2D PDF output product, because that means that we've lifted up the entire industry. So I couldn't agree more. We're going to be the reason that that change happens, and we're being very intentional about where we're starting so that we can move everyone into the future.
Yeah, and again, even if you want to do it, and I love that you're trying to cannibalize yourself and change the industry, it's not going to happen from one day to the other. It's like there's still, for me, it's just a surprise that there are still companies using 2D software instead of 3D software for 3D pieces. I've seen those. I've seen them, and I thought that didn't exist anymore. But I've seen recently companies doing that, and it's like, man, he did such a creativity and energy to do a 3D piece in 2D. I don't know. For me, it's just interesting.
I agree. And it is still happening because there are just not great tools out there, right? People are stuck in their ways. And so we're being very intentional about making something that is very usable. And man, for anyone out there who has not tried some of these old systems, right? They're created in the 90s. They're filled with buttons that you have to, track down even if you've been using the software for years. We want to make something that is very simple, right? And we're in a space where there are right and wrong answers and there are best practices, and helping people make those decisions so that it serves their need in the best way is really like what we're building towards.
Interesting. And I'm also curious now that I have you here, that you know a lot about this. Not only the interface, right? The way you're going to communicate your design, but you feel that also the way we produce pieces is going to change in the future. Like, we know 3D printers are a thing that it's evolving and getting better, but how do you imagine the future? Like, let's say I want to produce 100 steel pieces of, I don't know, something for a blender or whatever. Like, I'm going to be able to just send it to a machine and the machine will produce it and ship it automatically to me without human intervention at all? Or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, here's a vision of the future that I think Drafter is going to move people towards. Imagine you have a system of 100 parts that are going to come together and build whatever a blender. That would be a very complicated blender, but maybe, right? As you're building those parts, right, some of them are getting manufactured at different times, and there is going to be variability in the quantities that you're ordering, right? If I'm building a blender, I'm probably ordering 100,000 parts or 1 million parts, depending on the quantity that I'm producing. If we're talking cars, right, it's hundreds of thousands of the big parts, right? Millions and millions. There's millions of cars produced every year. And so being able to take all of those parts and as they come together, respond to the changes that are coming from your supply chain. And so if one part is too far in one direction, you can update the other manufacturing processes in real time to accommodate that difference in other parts. And that feedback loop of taking information from your inspection back into your design and reinforming the manufacturing of different components is something that doesn't exist today, right? It is incredibly manual. You need to talk to all these different people and have them pass these pieces of paper that contain the information that then goes back into a different ERP, right? And being able to have a single source of truth where this data is flowing freely, both from inspection back to design, but then through the entire workflow, is where I want to get hardware design, because that means that you can now take the most amazing, designer, engineer, have them create all these things and inform it with the best practices for each manufacturing process or each material or whatever else.
That's so interesting. You also believe that commercially is going to change in the sense of nowadays bidding processes are also a pain in the ass, because you have to go and find different manufacturers, and sometimes you have to manufacture in a country, and it's a nightmare sometimes. And if you are a new company, which sometimes I don't understand how some companies start producing a product so fast because it's just so hard. Do you believe that's also going to change? Like, it's going to be centralized place where the information is going to flow, but it's also going to serve the purpose of connecting you with the best manufacturer? Or
that is definitely a possibility, right? If you have all of that data, there's no reason that you won't be able to use it to say, help me find people or manufacturing partners who will allow me to achieve X, Y, and Z, right? That would be a very easy filtering problem to effectively set up, what you need, your requirements, and then pass those out to manufacturers and say, these are my needs. Rather than, having to have those conversations, there's a ton of data out there that shows the faster that a manufacturer can respond to a quote, the more likely they are to win that bid. Which is crazy, right? Every minute, every hour of delay for some of these manufacturers means the difference between getting a job or missing out on it. And so being able to have things flow at the speed of light, right, digitally, will allow many people to, succeed and get more business and be able to operate their machines as effectively as they can.
yeah, or maybe what some of these manufacturers are going to develop a way to automatically estimate, right? Like, hey, I get a piece and no human intervention. We're just going to estimate it automatically based on the shape, the amount of material, the complexity of the piece. I think it's going to be interesting also in terms of costs. I feel nowadays costs have gone are much lower than they were like 20, 30 years ago, and that's why we are able to buy stuff from China that costs $1. Just insane. How on earth can, I don't know, a radio cost $1? It's just insane. It doesn't matter if the quality is not the best. It's just insane. That you think that's going to be something that is going to impact, because China, they can do it because they have this big machine made for that. But you think having like a better flow of producing parts is going to impact on other industries or countries like the US, which costs are a little bit higher in terms of manufacturing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's no reason it won't, right? At the end of the day, something costs as much as the raw material, the labor, and the profits of the different parties that are involved. And so, obviously there's transportation baked in and delivery and actually fulfilling those orders. But if you look at some of these parts, right, you're now getting cheaper and cheaper processes with machines that have higher control, that have less human intervention in them. And, the amortization of some of these machines is insane. I was at the IMTS, the International Manufacturing Trade Show in Chicago earlier this year, and seeing the availability of CNC machines, right? There are gigantic machines that are constantly cutting, and they have gigantic machines that load and remove material. So the downtime in that machine is, minutes in a day, which is crazy, right? That means that it's running throughout the night with almost no human intervention. And if you have entire warehouses filled with these things, you're now getting the cost lower and lower and lower for everything that you're manufacturing. And so, of course, with commoditized goods or with things that are relatively easy to manufacture, it's definitely going to bring down the price, right? More automation is going to say, rather than having to ship it from China to the US, if we can get cheaper material in the US and have a zero human intervention manufacturing process, that part's price is going to drop significantly. And so, I'm really excited for the future where manufacturing automation is a reality, and not just in a couple of machine shops, really like everywhere, every city, every part of the country.
I think that would change it all, because I don't know. I'm not sure about 3D printers are fun and good, but the quality of what you need, they're not there yet. And they might not need to be there yet. it might be cheaper just to, you know what, I have a piece I want to replace. I just find a catalog or I model it in 3D myself, and I just send it to a manufacturer that produces one piece if I want. That's weird nowadays, right? It's weird that that you get a manufacturer that's going to produce you only one piece, but the processes are much better. Maybe that will happen.
Yeah. I mean, additive manufacturing is a really interesting kind of example of, there was a lot of hype around it, right? But as push came to shove, the reality of having large systems getting additively printed in plastic or in metal, right? There's of course instances where it makes a ton of sense. I'm sure everyone here knows what SpaceX is doing with their rocket engines, right? Or what NASA is doing with these amazing generatively printed things. But those parts cost, millions of dollars. If you're manufacturing cars, you need to have your parts be cheap because you're making such high volumes that every single cent or fraction of a cent really matters. And so additive manufacturing just hasn't been able to keep up with the, large manufacturing processes that serve most of the world, right? Between CNC manufacturing and injection molding, it's like 85% of everything that gets made. That's a number that I made up. Someone will have to fact check me on it, but it would be fascinated to know, right? It is the majority of the manufacturing processes. And so obviously additive allows you to do these crazy shapes and amazing things, but the use cases are not necessarily as expansive.
No, yeah, absolutely. But I feel that eventually they might get there. I don't know. My brother-in-law is the owner of a manufacturing facility, and they do injection, right? They do it through injection molds, and it's a pain in the ass. Every time you need to develop a new product, you have to the molds, right? The molds are so expensive. So expensive. I didn't know that. I thought it was like, well, it's just mold, and no, and it takes time, and not many people do them. It's just insane. And I don't know. I feel that it's going to be interesting when additive manufacturing reaches a point where it's, I don't know, at least equally efficient. It's going to change it all, I guess.
Totally. And it also depends on what you're trying to do, right?
Sure.
If you're trying to order 10,000 of some type of plastic part, it might be better to additively manufacture it. But really the minimum order quantity for something injection molded is like 100,000, depending on the size of the part. And so, if you're prototyping, definitely buy a 3D printer, buy a few of them. That's going to get you through the majority of the way to, true validation. But when it comes to mass manufacturing, it's going to be incredibly hard to compete with injection molding just because of its ability to reliably produce something.
Absolutely. And I'm also curious, which industry do you think is going to get one advantage of drafter? Like which really specific niche? Like parts for rockets, or where do you see like, oh, I think these guys are going to... I know everybody is going to get advantage out of drafter, but which one do you think is going to get the most out of it?
Yeah. This is interesting, right? Because we're building a tool that best serves high criticality components. And so that means, we're working with people from automotive, aerospace, robotics, right? Industrials, energy, medical devices, things that are high precision. And so it's really hard for me to say that there's going to be, what one niche group that gains success out of this, because we're already seeing such widespread adoption. Really, as we expand our product, we're going to be able to get into the larger nuances of each of these manufacturing processes, right? And so it doesn't matter what industry you're building something for. If you have incredibly tight tolerance bends in a sheet metal part, right, we're going to be able to build a system that reliably does that and communicates your challenges. And so it's not just the manufacturing processes, but it's the small edge cases and nuances where you need to do something reliably and consistency. We can build a process and a system that allows you to communicate that effectively.
Interesting. And going off topic, because you're a space guy. Like, you're a fan. What do you think is like? Are you excited on all what is happening right now? What do you think of all the stuff that SpaceX is doing? And I don't know, just curious.
I mean, it's amazing, right? As somebody who has built hardware, SpaceX has managed to maintain a velocity of hardware development that is, unparalleled anywhere else in the world. The scale of what they're doing, right? And being able to create a culture where everybody buys into moving incredibly quickly, taking risks, making mistakes out, loud. A lot of companies are embarrassed about doing something like this. And SpaceX, they're not going to crash a 400-foot rocket without anybody noticing. And so, they're doing it out front and they're letting people watch. And it's pretty amazing to see that happen. And, they're even asking the rest of the industry to come catch up, which is kind of funny. Everyone kind of says that SpaceX is 10 years ahead of the rest of the industry. But frankly, competition is good. And I think that there's a lot of awesome space companies solving hard problems and moving at that high speed. And I can't wait to see what they begin to do over the next few years.
You think that this can be the result of SpaceX and what they're doing, not only in terms of motivation, right? Like, I see rockets and I am not a engineer or a space engineer, and I'm like, I want to build a rocket, right? And for sure that's going to affect future generations, but also them developing so many technologies and showing the world that, hey, there is no need to spend 20 years building a rocket and then spend 20 more years, but hey, you can just do it really quick. So you think the industry is going to change for good of being like, I don't know, thousands of companies trying to do this, like trying to create maybe smaller rockets that they can develop in a couple of months and then throw them to space? Or what do you think is going to change in the industry?
Yeah, undoubtedly, right? SpaceX is insanely good at what they do because they build their products with manufacturing in mind, right? From the very first principles and the first day that they have a concept, they're thinking through the manufacturing processes that it would take to build hundreds of that thing. And so, you take the Raptor 3, I think they're producing like 3 engines a day at this point, which is bananas considering, one of their largest competitors produced 4 engines last year. That's, a huge discrepancy just in difference there. And so taking into consideration the manufacturing and the scalability of everything that they're building, I think in the last 24 hours, they announced that they're going to launch something like 25 rockets next year and 100 the year after that. And that's just of their new Starship, right? That level of scale is crazy. And frankly, engineers are leaving SpaceX all the time and starting their own companies. And so I hope that there is this, effect of all of these engineers taking these best practices and going and applying it to everything else that is, part of that ecosystem, part of building, colonies on Mars and on the moon and all the technology that needs to go in between now and to doing those amazing tasks.
Do you think we're going to get to Mars soon?
It's inevitable. I mean, soon is always an interesting thing, but undoubtedly, right? I would bet in the next 10 years, we have people standing on the surface of Mars.
For me, it's just exciting, man. That I could imagine people living in Mars, and my sons or future sons or whatever, when they get old, they're gonna talk to people who are living there, and I don't know. You can outsource stuff to people in Mars because they do it better because they're really good developers in Mars. I don't know. For me, it's just exciting.
Yeah, totally. I mean, think about all the new types of jobs, right? Our children's careers will be drastically different than ours, thanks to AI and thanks to technology. And, there are things that are just better to manufacture in space. Someone's going to figure out how to do that. And it's going to have some type of human involvement, whether they're operating it from the ground or, actually going into orbit. And that access and that availability is just going to keep spinning up the flywheel. And so That's a world I'm excited to live in.
It is like it's like those guys who developed the data center on a satellite. If you saw them set up, it's just like throwing a satellite and being just a whole data center there. So just it's just weird. Like, how do you define it? As it's edge computing, or how do you define it? Right? Because it's everywhere. So can you host it? Technically, I don't know. There's going to be a new category when companies say, I want it hosted in like planet Earth, my country.
Low Earth orbit of Earth, even though I will be on the moon. Great. Check.
Yeah. I don't know. Everything is going to change. And thinking that it's going to happen in the next decade, for me, it's just, I don't know. It's exciting, man. I don't know if because I'm a geek or what, but it just gets me excited.
I love it. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a great time to be alive, just with the technology that's getting developed and all the things that we're going to see change so quickly. Technology is accelerating the pace of development, and we are certainly at a period where it's awesome to be alive.
It is, absolutely. All right, man. I don't want to take more of your time. I know you're a busy guy, but before we wrap this up, can I ask you a couple of ping-pong questions?
Please. I love it.
All right. If you could collaborate with any person in history, which person would you choose?
Anyone in history?
Anyone, yeah.
I'm going to choose Leonardo da Vinci. We're going to bring him to the modern day, and we're going to give him generative AI, and we're going to unleash his, amazing engineering talents on the energy problems, the climate problems, maybe even the space problems. He was able to do amazing things with simple tools.
Imagine he was doing everything with sticks and rocks. Imagine. Yeah, that would be amazing. What do you think is going to be the next big trend? We can say AEC, but we can also include manufacturing. What do you think is going to be the next big trend?
Yeah, I mean, generative AI, right? Everyone is familiar with the advancements that ChatGPT has brought. When Drafter can figure out how to apply it to the hardware domain, the hardware development process is going to drastically change. And I think that this is a trend that people can't ignore. And it's an inevitable, thing that's going to happen. And I'm excited to, be one of the many people focusing on it. But we're going to be the reason that things really change.
Love it. What's your favorite building in the world? And have you ever visited?
I'm going to go with the La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. I love the story of how that building was designed upside down above a mirror, and they used hanging ropes that were all tied together to create the shape. And I was able to visit it many years ago, but it still had scaffolding all over it. So I think I'm due to go back for another.
That's no matter when you go, that's always the same case. Like there's always the scaffolding, right? No, but there is less now. I think 2025 or 2026 they're gonna finish it. But yes,
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, me too. It's a beautiful building. Beautiful building. And then any good book that you recommend? Have so many.
Yeah, Sapiens is an amazing book. It changed my life and my perspective on just the way that we're thinking about things. Another one that's a little sci-fi that I like is called Nexus. And it's about a not so distant future and the way that technology that's being developed today is going to change how humans interact and behave.
Interesting. Never read Nexus. I'm going to give it a look.
Give it
All right. And
fun.
Yeah, you're a gamer.
I think you'll like
sure. I will. And before we say goodbye to each other, can you tell everybody where they can know more about Drafter or contact you as well?
Yeah. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Chris Barton. Would love to chat if it's anything manufacturing, documentation related. If you have any questions, would love to get in touch. You can check out Drafter at drafterinc.com, drafterinc.com. Would love to help anybody who hates documentation create 2D mechanical drawings. Give me a shout.
Thanks so much for your time, Chris. It was super fun.
Thank you, Valentin. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks to our listeners. If you like this content, you can find past and upcoming episodes in ascworks.everse.com and at all of our Everse social media. We'd love to hear from you and recommendations for new content, so leave us a DM and we'll make sure to catch it.